So guys, my name is Sean Hirschman, and I'm the practice head for AI&A in XUS. I'm responsible for everything data analytics. I'm really excited to be here today. I just came from Copenhagen last night. We did a very similar event to the one we're doing here today. And particularly for all of my colleagues and clients, this is a learning experience. So as we go through the day, I want you all to kind of feel that this is something that you're fully participating in, fully engaged in. This is part of the time where you spend on learning. So hopefully we'll achieve that purpose. So we're talking about generative AI today. And generative AI is a very interesting topic. It's part of a broader sort of school of applications and technologies for intelligence. I drive this within DGM, within XUS, and it's a very interesting concept in general, and I know we're very familiar with it, but I want to start out, first of all, by showing a quick video about how we are helping our clients develop AI applications and evolve it. And then I'm going to go through the introduction to my esteemed colleagues who are going to take you through the various presentations today. So let's hear this video. Well, everything works fantastic in practice, right?
But one, tiny margins can provide the competitive edge that leads to a win. The angle is recurrent. It's applying the brake. The driver making split-second decisions as CEO of their vehicles. The day's leaders on the track and off use intuition to anticipate and act with human insight at superhuman speed. It may sound simple, but it's not. Here's why. In racing, data comes fast and from means. The driver, the car, the simulations, the tracking. In your company, it might come from inside or outside your organization. Wherever it comes from, it must be accurate, actionable, and accessible in order to turn that data into intelligence and make decisions at the speed of intuition. And intelligence, human and artificial, is only as valuable as the quality of the decisions it drives, the takeaways that inform the next correct course of action. Everything in competitive scenarios is about making the right calls, informed by the right information, both in the moment and before it happens. When you turn data into intelligence, you create a commanding differentiator, the ability to make clear decisions faster. You know how to anticipate expectations before your customers even face them, almost as if on intuition. That is the power of intuition engineering.
Intuition engineer. That's the logo of Cognizant, turning data into intelligence. This was a broader AI category. We're all here today to talk about generative AI. And generative AI is something that has been in the news a lot. The amount of money that a lot of our colleagues and hyperscalers have spent on it is in the billions. I know that I was reading a McKinsey article recently where they said that the productivity gains from this technology will rival the entirety of the UK economy, something like $3.5 trillion annually. So it's huge numbers. So because of this, we felt that it's to get together with our partners, because at Cognizant we like to do things with partners. And with Microsoft, we're having a world tour. We have done it in New York, actually first, gone to San Francisco. As I said, I came from Copenhagen yesterday, where I did it with our colleagues in Denmark, along with our colleagues at Microsoft. It was really, really successful. Again, key thing, it's a learning experience. So please, let's immerse ourselves in the learning. We're very lucky today because we're doing one in Dallas at the same time. So as we take some pictures, we're saying hello to our colleagues in Dallas who are also doing it at the same time. We're going on to London, Chicago, then eventually to Frankfurt, Dubai, and Singapore. So this is part of a series of get-together with our clients, with our partners, discuss this really critical topic. Now, we're very lucky today because our objective is not just to inspire, but keep you at the heart of the innovation and really get you started. So what you're going to hear a lot about, you're going to see a lot of demos, you're going to see a lot of ideas, a lot of development. that's happening in the marketplace. And again, the more interactive we have this session, the better it will be for all. I'm very lucky today to have a number of folks. I'm going to introduce the first person last. But first of all, I'm really delighted. I'll spend some time talking about Nir. Nir is our Gen AI EMEA leader. He is an AI expert. He's a specialist with many, many years of experience. He has experience in text analytics, search, and OpenAI. So he is the man to ask any questions about what Microsoft has in store, what they're announcing, what they announce, what does it mean to you. And he's going to be really giving us really good overview of what you can do with Microsoft in this field. But first, and obviously we have other folks that are going to do some demos. Rehan, Pablo, and Paula's going to be with me in the panel after the conversation. But first of all, I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleague, Gregory. Gregory is my friend and my colleague. He leads our Benelux in AI&A, and he's a very keen developer and promoter of the ideas of Gen AI. So I would like to hand it over to Gregory for our first interesting presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. Not too warm here. Everything okay? So we will have an agenda, and I think first of all, I think we have a kind of mixed audience, but I try to set a little bit the scene about understanding what generative AI is all about, and then translate it into the enterprise context. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of hype, yeah? And let's be honest, I think whatever is happening in the consumer world, we just cannot just adapt and use this within the enterprise world. So I think the enterprise reflection, I think, is for all of you, I think a very important reflection. Yeah. The great thing is that I will not only explain it, but we have some two nice demos, yeah, which gives you a little bit of a tangible benefit. Equally, also Nir will show you some demos about that. And then finally, we will end up a little bit in a panel discussion, but there is also the opportunity for you to ask questions to us. Yeah, we want to share best practices to you, but equally don't hesitate to ask questions to us. As be honest, I'm still learning every day, so it does not stop after this session. It will keep on happening. Now, I thought before we even start talking about generative AI, and it's a slide coming from Gartner. I did not make it, yeah, but I think it's all about AI. And let's be honest, AI is not something new. If I do ask Chat GPT about who invented AI, there's a guy called John McCartney in 1956 that started the journey around AI. And let's be honest, we already have been on a big journey with AI. Yeah? And I'm already 25 years in the industry. And let's be honest, I think the art of the possible, time over time, has become indeed more and more advanced. And let's be honest, I think AI so far we have been mainly using to do two things. First of all, I think predicting, yeah? Because I think we all know that in the world of business intelligence, we're still burning a lot of money on the what question, but we're trying to get away from it and answer also the why and what's going to happen next and what should I do. And we've been work very hard on that. So I think AI is still there, and we did already a lot. That will not disappear. I'm always saying the AI that we have developed so far has always been for a specific task. Yeah? If I look to a sales guy about forecasting, yeah, how can AI help me to make a better forecast, yeah, towards the future? How can I do stock optimization? So it always was, I have the data available and I try to explore and find the pulse into the data is where we have been focusing on. If we now come to Gen AI is not anymore about the predictive or the automation perspective. It's all about augmentation. I think one reflection, which is I also extremely like, is that, let's be honest, the last 100 years, we have been driven a lot of automation. Yeah? And the automation was, we often called it, and the automation was impacting the blue collar workforce big time. generative AI will not so much impact the blue-collar population, but will impact the knowledge field. So everybody who has a university degree, be scared, because now there is something available, that generative AI. It creates content on the spot, which I think is a main difference. Secondly, I think when we do with AI, and we just did a research on the Benelux market about analytics adoption, I'm not sure if you look in your own organizations, but how much money you're spending on data analytics is still spent on the what element, on your dashboards and reports. You cannot imagine how much money is still spent there. And I think there you need to step back, because you cannot keep on doing that. There are smarter ways to optimize this and free up money to certainly make sure that you step forward always using traditional AI, but Gen AI, don't miss this. Don't miss this, because the impact it will have on productivity, the impact it will have on us as a society is quite substantial. And for that reason, I see a lot of customers I never saw, and I know some of you here sitting in this audience, where even board members have a KPI on Gen AI. And they are releasing investment money, not in a matter of months and years, but in the context of weeks and months. And I think it's as disruptive as that. Yeah. I think we always had a discussion about in data analytics and AI about the tension between IT and business, about the creation of value. Yeah, I think Gen AI, you will see clearly is a business responsibility. Yeah, and what I mean also with the business responsibility, next to technology, there are a lot of other elements that becomes into play, and ethics is a very important one. Yeah? Because we can do a lot, but we will every day will need to reflect on the fact what we will use. Is this ethical in the context of the ethical definition on what we believe as a company? And I don't know how many of you have defined ethical standards around AI in your company, but I'm sure that a lot of you will need still to start with it, because I think that there's still a lot of things. And then literacy. I think I only could say with data, we also have a data literacy program to make sure that we use more data or create more value with data in your organization. With Gen AI, make sure that everybody knows it. Yeah. Kick off a kind of literacy program. Now let's position a little bit where is generative AI coming from, because a lot of terminology has been thrown towards us. And I already mentioned AI, and then you know that we moved into the machine learning. More compute resources were become available. We were able to run indeed more complex models. We moved from a deterministic to a probabilistic world. And like I said, in the sales forecasting, the stock optimization, and the next best offer, next best actions are very nice examples of machine learning, where we have applied machine learning. Then we say, it would be great if we could create a memory. And there is where the neural networks came in, because I think instead of always restarting, I think we were creating a memory. Yeah. And you know that the famous, and I think certainly in the healthcare industry, already the vision apps, where indeed we've trained based on pictures, and that helps us, for instance, to detect cancer. Is one of the nice things we have applied with neural networks. But on the back of this evolution, I think a few years ago, another hyperscaler, I will not name it, I think developed something like the transformers. And a transformer is a self-attention mechanic, which is a kind of specialization within the neural networks perspective. And it's a little bit where different user data is talking and speaking with each other. And at a certain moment, one of them is declared as the most lovable one. These transformers has really been the game changer. And the game changer, and I think that the hyperscaler that developed it has a long time ago giving it to the open source community, and that is where it has been picked up. And the transformers are the basis for generative AI. Now, what is generative AI? It's all about content creation based on a prompt. Content creation is very important, well, but also the prompt. And the prompt is the art of asking the question. Because we can get a lot of back from generative AI, but the way of how we ask the question will give us a different result back. And so I think there is certainly in the enterprise world, the art of prompt engineering becomes a very important art. Because if I'm a bank and I want to use Chat GPT or generative AI to talk to my customers, and I have somehow defined a communication standard or a tone of voice in my company, I would like that the Chat GPT world to my customers is using the tone of voice that I have defined as a company that should be used towards the outside world. Yeah? So I think you see there in generative AI, everything around prompt and prompt engineering, extremely important. We'll come back on that. The foundational models. These foundational models, you know what the problem was if we were ending up here in neural networks, if we wanted to do something with, for instance, with vision or with images, we need to spend 4 million, 6 million euros of money on it. And then once it was there, we need to throw again a few millions to it to maintain it, because otherwise at a certain moment, the model was not becoming relevant. Well, I think these foundational models, based on the transformer technology, and they're continuously being trained by a lot of unlabeled data, yeah, which is a little bit of a semi-self-learning perspective that is applied, and that is created for a certain context and a certain purpose. I will come back on that. The most famous foundational model at this moment is the large language model. Yeah? And that's what we then in the text perspective. But let's be honest, there is much more. And then the last one, the famous word Chat GPT. Now we all know Chat GPT. Who knows what the abbreviation is of GPT? Anybody that dares to ask? Generative pre-trained transformers. So transformers, generative, pre-trained. Yeah. I think, like I said, I think traditionally with AI, we explore. Now we create with Gen AI. Traditionally, AI was single-tasked. The art of the possible with Gen AI is really a multi-task dimension, which imposes another challenge in finding the use cases, because you have a lot of different ways of how to look to find the opportunity. The opportunity. The foundational models. Let's be honest, that is the heart of everything, yes? Because that is where, based on these foundational models, and like I said, I think the language models are the most famous ones, but it does not stop there. Yeah, it also is about vision models, the creation of images. I think there was something here, art on the wall, but it's also about music and voice. And from an IT perspective, very interesting, the code perspective, to create code, test code, even help us to take design decisions on code. Now, these foundational models is something that we do not train, we use it. And I think that's also a different way of thinking, because in the old days, when we wanted to do something, we took our technology box and we were building something. These foundational models does not need to be built. We need to use them, and we will need to use them and then fine-tune them in a perspective to becoming useful and sensible within our organization. Secondly, I think very important, these foundational models, they bring big value to us, but at the end, we want to leverage the value of these foundational models on our own data in our organization. And we need to be damn sure that our own data is not flowing back to I call it the public brain or the common brain. And let's be honest, most of the hyperscalers in the enterprise world are very firm on it. And I'm sure that Nir will indeed spend a lot of time also in explaining and guaranteeing to you that no information is leaking towards the outside world. And it is still your own privilege and your own data. The foundational models is a marketplace as such. If anybody has of you a bright idea to create a foundational model, go and call a venture capitalist. He will throw money to you. Yeah? It's an extremely big market, and a foundational model can be big. The Chat GPT, I think Nir, you were telling me, or I don't know, somebody was telling me, throwing 100 million to it to train it. Now, a foundational model can also be something smaller. It does not always need to be a big elephant. And I think I also believe that in creating outcomes going forward, you will make a combination of smaller and big foundational models and bring it into play into your enterprise organization. The good enough shop, the perfect shop. And that is not an easy one to answer. And I want to make first start, if you look again to that analytics adoption research that we do, how much of you have been spending hours, days, millions on creating that data lake, data warehouse, in trying to create the perfect quality, 100% quality correct way of data? And by doing that, we missed out maybe about using much more AI, and we're still in the what age instead of the why and the what next age. I think with the foundational models, we're getting a little bit in the same one. The fact of a lot of foundational models, and I think there are two types of foundational models. There are a lot of foundational models where you are coming on the market, which you can consume by an API. Now, if you consume it by an API, then it's like a product. What has been defined, you need to accept it. You cannot tweak and fine tune it. You need to take it as it comes. So I think the first question I would already say, is it good enough? Maybe yes, it's not perfect. It's good enough. Second question, maybe from a functional perspective, it's good enough. But is it also in line with my ethical norms of my organization? Question mark. Yeah. So I think we will see the combination of both, and I think a lot of you are fast tracking with these API-based type of foundational models that you're using. But I think we come just out of a project, where indeed I think if we talk, for instance, about the concept of infobot, if you want an infobot, and I think Rian will show there the demo, if you want to make it personalized, the way of how I want to talk to a guy or a lady of 20 years old is completely different than the way of how I want to talk to a guy or a lady who's 75 years old. If I need to kick back and send an instruction back to somebody, I need to be much more descriptive, to a 75-year-old lady or guy than to a young guy that only they talk in abbreviations with each other. So I think there's an opportunity as such. We also see around. There's a lot of elements around contact center optimization that you can do. And again, I think these out of the box will always have catch up. They also have a roadmap. And I think the question is, can I wait on the roadmap items or will I build it myself? It's a little bit like in the data world. Do I buy an application or will I build a data product? Be careful. If you ask it, it's not that the outcome is predictable. Every time you ask a question, the result can be different. The second observation is that it's not perfect. So everybody that thinks that we are now getting the 100% perfect answer, no. It is still a probabilistic model. So I think we will need certainly to make sure that we put procedures and architectures in place to control it. Because I don't want, if a foundational model is getting into a hallucination mode, which is a reality, I think there's some stuff in the newspaper around that. I think I immediately want to get it offline, instead of being there. And I think, a lot of debate. We still need to be controlled as humans. in control. Yeah? So getting into that active dialogue with your customer, but also with your employee, because the employee experience becomes also much more important. I think there, the content that we can bring into play is massive. So I think certainly big field to play. Second is knowledge-heavy processes. Yeah? The semantic search perspective, I think, is also a kind of massive opportunity. And I'm always saying, first look. I think the first field of opportunity, what I see in most of the customers is you look to the process where most of the people are attached from. This gives you maybe a kind of prioritization on where to focus on. I know in the banking sector, KYC is a burden and a cost. If I could optimize this obligation, I think that is maybe something that could bring a lot of benefit back to my organization. Thirdly is the citizenship. AI is your best buddy. I think we're still not ready, and we showed that in the analytics research that we also did. There's still a question about, do we completely get to the AI to AI, machine to machine perspective, or do we still want that humans are in control? I think AI is there for a reason to be your buddy. And let's be honest, will be a difference between people using it and people not using it. But one of the cases, for instance, around the citizenship is everything around summarization. Can you imagine? I think all of you must have a lot of meetings. Can you imagine that you go out of your meeting and that there is a nice summary of your meeting with the keynotes and the action points on it? It is the art of the possible nowadays. And then thirdly, the last case is certainly rich in IT. Everything around code development, code testing, massive type of opportunity. So we see there where the opportunity is. It's not within finance. It's not within production. I think we see that the massive cases are in marketing and sales, operations and IT, and certainly in research and development. And then mainly, I think what I see currently, or what we see, is in the life sciences industry. Now, to give you an example of operations, you can only imagine. Imagine that I have 5,000 call center agents. Yeah, I can, between 15 and 20%, the lead time to give a resolution to the customer that is calling is a reality. I can also make sure that the way of how to find a solution is fast-tracked. Yeah? Even I think they are now, and that's a nice one. Yeah. Even we believe that in call centers, we could reduce the total population by 50%. Now, one of the challenges, for instance, in a call center context is also the inflow of a lot of new people that are only there for 4 months, 6 months, 7 months, and then they move out to another job. You can fast track to train them, but the infobots will help them and support them to find and drive the right dialogue with your customers. Yeah. So I think you will get easily much more productivity out of the new people who are coming there. Guess what? Who is getting into a problem? The role of the supervisor and the productivity of the supervisor is going down because he needs to spend less time on coaching and educating the new call center agents that are coming in. On IT engineering, GitHub, I think you all know it. The concept of the co-pilot of GitHub, you can save up to 50% of your time. Developers can save up to 52% of their time by using the concept of the co-pilot in GitHub. I think we're all constrained that we do not have enough resources. Can you imagine that you can save 50% of your development time? Yeah, and I think we could give it back for a lot of other and maybe useful things towards our organization. Rian will talk more about that, but I think for me that's insane. What we can do here is the concept. When a 75-year-old guy is asking advice for a mortgage, yeah, I will give him a very pointed answer. Because it's not about giving him an answer, but conversational AI, what we did, we tried to create the intents, anticipate on the type of questions that were coming, and then we were creating a little bit of a general answer back. Here we are tweaking and tuning and putting very specific for each. And it's an easy world, it's a small world. That's a complex thing. And I think certainly when you take a use case, when you define a use case, please make sure that your context is well defined. Next to that, there is a very important element of integration. Because people do not like it. So the human-centric design element is important there. And as you know, in the enterprise world, we want to leverage and use our own information because that is where we will source the most big value out of it. Now, the last one. This is not a technology play. Yeah? AI for a good reason. We have and I think we could be privileged because in Europe we have a lot of legislation around that. You could look to it as a burden, but I think we need to control AI in this world for a good reason. So the fact that legislation is there, and you know that last week, on the fact of that publicly, we can capture a video of you publicly is not allowed. Yeah, the social scoring mechanics are not allowed. Yeah, or forbidden by law. Yeah, I think that it's all there for a good reason. Think about your ethical standards. Like I said, how many of you have thought about putting ethical standards in place? If I do something with it, responsible AI, let's be honest, I think in the industry, we always had the art of exporting things towards the future. I'm getting old. I'm 25 years in the industry, but 25 years ago, I was having already the first discussion around master data management. Now, 25 years later, some customers are now start spending money on master data management. It's the same with responsible AI, MLOps. Yeah, we keep on exporting it. We cannot export it anymore. We will need to do something seriously with it. Yeah. So I think the human-centric design, for adoption, very important. If I give you the best T-shirt that fits you, if it has the wrong color, you will never use it. Same with Gen AI, if you embed it in your processes, but they don't like it, they don't trust it, they will not use it. Yeah, and try to create indeed as much as possible enthusiasm. And then the good enough statement. I think that's also a very important balance. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of risk, but let's not also make sure that risk paralyzes us. That's happened a little bit, my example with data, because we were so fond to create that 100% correct data, and that we did not have the time to move to the why and the what's next. Where, like, for instance, in AI, maybe data quality of 85% is enough for AI to find the pulse into the data which is available. Okay, good. So that's, I hope, a little bit condensed and sharp on what. If you have any questions, I think, Rian, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, so there are lots of opportunities regarding generative AI, but one of the fields where we can generate value quite quickly is in the field of customer contact. I've been working on automating customer contact using traditional conversational AI tools for the past few years in banking. And there I saw the strengths and weaknesses of the current state-of-the-art solutions. We'll quickly go over it, but I think we all once encountered a poor performing chatbot that could not even understand simple queries. And even if it could understand the queries, it can usually not help with the more complex ones, because especially in finance and banking, it might require more understanding of context. And often they are very general. They don't offer a lot of personalization. And also from an enterprise perspective, even building simple chatbot solutions still requires a lot of manual work. So perfect, thanks. Starting from there, we thought, how can we utilize generative AI and especially large language models, such as the ones offered by Microsoft, to address these limitations and actually build a solution that will bring the next level of automated customer contact. We built a demo around it, which I will now show. Perfect. Let's say we have here Levi or Levi, because he's Dutch, and he wants to know about the minimum amount he can borrow. Now the bot will give a response. The minimum amount you can borrow is 5,000 euros. But there are two things to notice here. One is that we did not manually curate any response. We have the large language model. We have 62 PDFs, and we just steer the model towards the PDFs, and the model is able to understand the minimum amount I can borrow, understands the context it needs to find, and it understands what it needs to use to actually generate this response. And secondly, it's not a black box model. It actually gives the source of the data. As you can see, it says source loan condition section 3 retail. So it's actually able to understand where it found the context, and it's able to link to the specific data source to add transparency to the solution. Now, this is just an example of how generative AI or how a tool can look in the data source to actually find context and generate a response. But as Gregory mentioned, where generative AI really excels is in actually tailoring this response to a specific user, for example, based on age. Here we have Peter, who wants to know where he can get his statements. And here the response is quite direct. Just log in, go to statements, and you can also download your statements in PDF format. Well, for a 21-year-old guy, this is probably a suitable response. However, if my grandma would get this response, she would probably call me and ask, what are PDFs? So for her, it might not be the best response. So we instructed the tool to actually tailor the response based on age. So here you have Victor, who is 75 years old, asking the same question. And here you can see it actually uses the same data, but is able to tailor the response. So it gives more number direct instructions. And something very funny, instead of referring to a PDF, it refers to the ability to get the actual statements physically by mail, which again, here is probably a good response for Victor, but Peter, 21-year-old, would probably not be satisfied with this response. And this is actually brilliant because we did not manually curate anything. We just said tailored response based on age. So the next conversation I have with my grandma will not be about PDFs because he already gets the right response here. Yeah. Yeah, these are 62 publicly available PDFs about loans, mortgages, all kind of information we fed to the model. Yeah. Now let's move on with Levi, who now has a mortgage at the bank. And one of the limitations of the current solutions is that it's often like one question, one response, like one interaction. However, Levi here wants to know more. First, he wants to know, can he use his current mortgage to renovate the bathroom? Again, the model picks up the question, finds the relevant context in the PDFs, generates a response, as you can see here. But Levi wants to know more. He wants to know if he can actually use 10K. And if he can use 10K, will it then be against the original interest rates or against the new interest rates? And for us, it's easy to follow that 10K and interest rates is related to the first question about current mortgages. However, for a bot, it can be quite complicated to understand. So we actually gave it memory here. So the bot is able to understand that all the follow-up questions are actually related to the first initial query, which again is something that the current solutions are not great at. Another ability that we discovered here is that we can teach the model to do calculations on the fly. So here again, we have Levi earning a certain amount, but he also has some debt payments towards his mortgage and his car loan. But he wants to take on another loan, and he read something about the debt ratio. So he asks, "Can you help me with that?" Now the model here is able to actually make the calculation and come up with a graph. But there are a few important things here to notice. One is that we did not specifically program it to do this calculation. We gave it a PDF, and it was able to pick up the formula in the PDF and do the calculation on the fly using the data embedded in the customer profile, and is able to then call a function API released by OpenAI to actually use this to create a graph like you see here. So some neat functionality we discovered here without explicitly programming it. Now, one other limitation is that since we use quite a big corpus of PDFs, of data, the information can be quite ambiguous. For example, how much does a card cost? One solution is just to give all the information about cards, like credit card costs 10 euros, debit cards cost 20. However, that's not a great experience, so we actually enabled the bot to ask clarifying questions whenever the query is ambiguous. Here you can see the bot is able to ask, we offer debit cards, credit cards, which one do you mean? Now we extended this functionality to not only work with information queries, but also with action-based queries. So here you can see Sophie. She wants help with her mortgage application. The bot then is able to say, okay, what's your situation? What are you looking to buy? And do you have some information on your income and assets? And again, the bot is able to understand if I want to answer this question or want to help with mortgage application, I need a few pieces of information, and is able to ask for those pieces of information. Again, without us explicitly saying, if this is the question, then ask for this, this, and this. Now, not everything can and will be automated. There will still be a future where agents will play an important role in the customer journey. For example, Sophie asking for to renegotiate her mortgage. Here you can see the bot is actually able to retrieve the correct information, but does not have all the capabilities to actually do this action. So it will transfer it to a human agent. However, one of the biggest barriers now is language. The agent and the customer have to speak the same language. So we use generative AI to help there as well. So here we have Sophie speaking in English, and we have Jenny in the Philippines speaking Filipino. And here we use AI to actually transform or translate the conversation on the fly, so they can have a conversation in their own language and get a response back in their own language as well. You can see answer in Filipino, translation to English. So no language barrier here. So again, it's not automated, but even in this situation where we have like human agent context, generative AI can play a role using the translation capabilities. Yeah.
Machine learning or deep learning, it's always about the labels, what's correct and what's not correct. In the large language models, the responses that we generate, we have no idea how the customers are satisfied, how much they are satisfied. Is there a way that the customer can feedback or from a Gen AI point of view, we get a response that, okay, this, whatever response we get to the customer or for the external party is good enough, or how much they are satisfied with, and how much we can improve further our models. Is it a process we have, kind of a reinforcement a process to improve the models, or how does it work?
You want to answer this?
You want to answer first?
So I think there are two ways to look to it. First of all, will you be able to change the foundational model? No, because that's lock. I also said it's not that we're feeding data to retrain the model. That's what we are not doing. So there certainly will be an important element of the life cycle of our foundational model. And there's where I'm saying all these venture capitalists that are fueling money into the foundational model, it will highly probably be a kind of subscription-based model, right, to guarantee also that these models are being kept and being healthy. Yeah? So I think that would be my first reaction. I don't know, Ryan, or even Sean, you want.
Because you talked upon, you spoke about very not so good chat models within organizations. We are not so happy with what we have within the organizations, but we don't have a process to give our feedbacks that it can take and improve itself.
But I think another observation there is like I said, is the art of prompt engineering, where you also will put controls into place. Because the way of how you want that this communicates to your customer, it needs to be 100% aligned with your tone of voice. And there I think you put some controls into, I will call it in the prompt engineering development that do. And a third, I think, observation that I have is my statement of control the beast. Because each of these models also come with a set of parameters that you tweak and tune, which have certain kind of sensitivity. And I think that sensitivity becomes an art or a science as such, also about programming that kind of sensitivity levels. And there is where I think for sure you will take feedback and get feedback, which will means that you will need to reprogram, for instance, the sensitivity of certain type of forms.
Yeah, and also talking about, I think we all know the garbage in, garbage out principle. I think that applies here even more as well. The way we structure the context kind of relates to the quality of the responses even more, since we don't have complete control. It's also something Pablo will talk about later.
Exactly. So coming back to my traditional way of AI, the forecast model, the next based on the next phase action. Let's be honest, we had some historical information, and then we used AI to find the build, and then we recommend to the same guy all your all data, the probability and the propensity to find models. This was only explore stage. Imagine that you're now sitting and you're going as a sales guy, you're sitting in front of your customer, you're listening, and he is giving you feedback. Now getting into a real-time dimension where you can capture what he's saying and create it back into an output. So maybe we could even dream as a sales guy, I'm going to my customer. I said, what is important on your roadmap? What's important on your, from an IT perspective? He explained it to me, and in the background, IPC is creating the golden deck to then present back my answer towards the customer. So you get a real-time perspective, and you get also a contextual perspective, which I think we not have. And I think that gives so much of opportunity going forward. And that's the same also with the call center agents. It's also listening into the dialogue which is happening, and then how do I now make it more rich and personalized and to the point in a real-time dimension.
And exactly, and if the customer is angry, you have a different tone of voice.
Yeah, and adding on top of that, like we So here, this is the prompt. We use the instructions in the prompt to steer the model. So here we can see, for example, one of the lines is answer the question as if I was 8 years old, like the example we showed earlier. But here you can easily extrapolate it to answer the question based on the mood of the previous interaction, something like that. So there are plenty of opportunities to steer the conversation or steer the response based on certain aspects, for example, emotion. As showed here, so this is one of the components we use. Now, this was just a small demo, showed several components, understanding context, memory, calculations, different languages, all in order to bring personalized messages towards the customer. Now, imagine if you have these functionalities in your own customer contact center, what it would do with the experience towards the customer. That's it on my side, but I'm happy to discuss more during the drinks or after.
Thank you, Rian. Now we have our most famous speaker. So we will now get some clear Microsoft answers and thought leadership. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Great. Thank you. So I received a really nice presentation here from Sean about my role and what I do. So I'll just quickly remind you who I am. So near everyone, I'm part of a team at Microsoft called Global Black Belt AI team. You know, the Americans love to give us really fancy names for different parts of the business. So we call us Global Black Belt. What that means in general terms is that we are a team that has expertise in AI technologies, obviously the Microsoft AI portfolio. And as you can imagine, we spend probably 90 to 95% of our time with generative AI these days, just because of the interest and demand. So like you, I mean, I don't think anyone could have ignored what happened since November last year when OpenAI released Chat GPT as a free service. And the amount of interest and adoption of this app, but also the interest in the technology itself. But like anything that gets a lot of demand, we have seen a lot of concerns about this technology. And I can tell from a personal perspective, a lot of misinformation in the media. I can't remember myself in any time of my life, and I've been in AI for a while, driving to work and listening to a news article in the mainstream media about Microsoft and OpenAI talking openly about AI. That almost never happens, right? But it is now happening. So what I wanted to do today, spend a little time about what is, so we spoke already about what is generative AI. So what is the characteristics of the technology? Hopefully we got that behind us. Now, I just wanted to speak a little bit about Azure OpenAI. And the reason I think it's important, you all come from large organizations, and to deploy these technologies in an organization, there's a couple of things that we need to be conscious of in order to do it safely and be in a place where we can actually use this technology without breaching our own company policies in data privacy, data security, and so on. So a couple of things to note about Azure OpenAI. And again, the reason I'm presenting this slide is because I've heard a lot of misinformation being given to our customers about OpenAI. And I think it's really good to just level set on what Azure OpenAI is. The first thing to note, and actually we had a discussion about it earlier upstairs, the Azure OpenAI service is isolated from every customer. So there's a couple of things to really focus on here. Your data is your data. When you deploy the Azure OpenAI service, the data is isolated within your network boundary, similar to any other Azure service. So what I mean by that is it's completely up to you how you control the data. You encrypt it, you don't encrypt it, you isolate it from the public internet with a VNet, or you don't. How you secure the data, completely up to you. We don't store the data that you use through the API. There's a bit of a discussion to have here, and I'm happy to discuss it with you. But the message from me is you have complete control on where the data is stored, how it's stored, who has access to the data. Microsoft does not have access to the data. OpenAI does not have access to the data. Second point, also really, really important to understand. There is a complete air gap between your use of OpenAI on Azure and the training of the next versions of the GPT model. So as an example, training GPT-5 is not done by using customer data at all. This is exactly why Microsoft spent to date, I think, 11 billion with OpenAI. It is to fund the hardware behind it, but also to fund the research. And the research is done by buying data, but also using publicly available data in research. So there's a complete air gap between the training of the models. It doesn't continuously learn by using customer data. The training of the model is done only by research. Your data is protected. So for anyone who has any experience with Azure, data protection in Azure, generally speaking, applies to OpenAI in exactly the same way. It is no different to spinning up a database or a storage account or whatever you want to use in Azure. So let's talk a little bit about what's the relationship between the two companies, and also a little bit about the service. So as you know, OpenAI is a startup. Microsoft started investing in OpenAI in 2019. Just to give you time reference, in those days, OpenAI just released the first version of GPT, so nothing publicly available until 3 years later. But Microsoft decided to invest because we saw the promise in the research that they were doing. I mean, these guys have crazy aspirations. They want to create AGI, which is general intelligence. They are miles away from doing that. But what we are seeing with GPT-4 is sparks of AGI, because it has the ability to reason, it has the ability to solve problems, even if there's more than one solution to a problem, which is something that we haven't seen AI models being able to do before. OpenAI realized very, very early on that if they want to make this technology globally available, they need to partner with a global cloud vendor, because they're a startup. They just don't have access to the right hardware. They don't have global reach. They don't have global data centers, and Microsoft does. So from their perspective, the only route to make this globally available is the partnership with Microsoft. And also, what that partnership produced, also obviously in partnership with NVIDIA, is the hardware. The hardware that these models run on is very, very large, capable hardware. It's actually nicknamed AI supercomputer because it is so big. The amount of the amount of investment needed to train these models using this hardware is also imaginary numbers, like hundreds of millions. So the partnership between OpenAI, Microsoft, and NVIDIA produced the hardware. We deploy it in our data centers. Everything that OpenAI does run on our data centers, including the free Chat GPT that everyone is using, that is running on Azure in the background. And what Microsoft did is we take exactly the same technology that OpenAI makes available on their side using a credit card, and make it available to our customers, but in an enterprise environment. So this is what Microsoft does well. We have been working with enterprise for decades, so we'd like to think that we have a good understanding of what are the minimum requirements for enterprises. And I think we discussed it in the previous slides: data privacy, data security, the ability to control where the data goes, and also things like RBAC control and everything else that we need to in order to use this technology in a safe way. Sorry, just maybe one last comment here. So OpenAI continuously does research. You will see announcements coming from OpenAI. And the way we work together is whenever they release a new technology, they first deploy it on their side. So you will see technologies appearing on their side first. And only once we prove to ourselves that we can deliver these technologies to our enterprise customers in a safe way, we make them available in Azure for consumption. So as an example, when OpenAI released the plugin function, we had to make sure that we can provide the same capability, but in an enterprise fashion with all the controls needed for enterprises to be able to use it. And only then we release it. So there's always going to be a small gap just because of the considerations that we have for our customers to use it. Not sure if anyone been able to listen to the announcements during Build. So Build, for those who don't know, is our annual developer conference where, like any other big American company, there's a certain time in the year where we make announcements. So during Build, we announced the concept of Copilot. So I don't know if anyone heard that concept before, but the idea behind Copilot, and I think a lot of the discussion around how we deliver generative AI, we don't want to do is we don't want to take humans out of the loop, right? Because that is not what we're trying to do with this technology, and that's not what is useful about this technology. The whole idea behind Copilot is provide, or let's say, supercharging humans, making them 10 times more productive because we can now. So normally, or up until now, the idea behind Copilots was limited to the Microsoft products. So you must have heard announcements about the Office Copilot, which will give you a lot of generative AI capabilities within the Office product suite. And the same goes for Dynamics and the GitHub Copilot for developers. But we are stretching the idea of Copilot way beyond that. So again, the way we see Copilot is an application that uses modern AI technology to assist with complex cognitive tasks. So think about an agent assist Copilot, or think about a search Copilot, or think about a process automation Copilot. Anything that we do in the company that is inefficient, in our organizations that are inefficient today, can be done with Copilots. So Microsoft has created a range of Copilots within our own products, which can do whatever, a lot of things depending on the product that you use. But you will want to create your own Copilots, dealing with your own business processes. It can be a call center, it can be customer facing, it can be internal facing. It doesn't matter. We want to use these generative AI technologies to create our own solutions. And when we create these Copilots, we don't, when we think about these things, we think way beyond the generative AI technology itself, right? Because we need to do, we have many tasks surrounding the LLM. It can be GPT-4, it can be a small open source LLM that you fine-tune for yourself, for your own industry-specific or organization-specific tasks. But we need technologies to surround these LLMs in order to help us build these solutions. This is exactly what Microsoft is doing with the Copilot stack. So the idea behind the Copilot stack is a set of technologies that help you build these Copilots internally. And all of these capabilities are very new capabilities, so they're really tiny babies at the moment because they've just been announced a few weeks back. And you will see them starting to be released into generally available products very soon. But I think what I like about this, and I think this is, for me as a Microsoft employee, is great because I think we are the only organization on the planet that actually is thinking about it way beyond just the language model itself. We are thinking about how do we get, how do we give tools in order to build solutions? So let's talk about these technologies. Plugins. Again, I spoke about it a couple of minutes ago. This is something that OpenAI released recently. The idea behind plugins is, the LLMs have a lot of capabilities. However, if we want to build complex solutions internally in the organization, we will need to fetch data from our internal systems to help the LLM, augment the LLM with data that it obviously doesn't have. Plugins are the way to do that. So it's kind of almost think about it like a pipe from the language model to whatever system. It can be customer records, it can be a CRM system, it can be an accounting system. Depending on the use case, you might want to get this data, and it can be whatever. It can be a database, or it can be a search platform, or it can be a storage account. Depending on the use case, these plugins are going to become very useful. In all honesty and just being realistic, the first plugins that Microsoft are going to release are going to be for Azure technologies, but very, very shortly after that, we will enable our customers to build their own plugins to connect to anything. The second one is a product we called Prompt Flow. So if you think about complex solutions that you want to build assisted with LLMs, so some of the solutions that we demoed earlier, in order to build these solutions, you need to connect, or you think about it like a flow of tasks that the LLM needs to do. It's not only one task. So we might, in customer interactions, as an example, we might need to ask to fetch data from a document repository, and we need to maybe augment the LLM with some data from our customer records in order to answer a specific question that the customer asked. And each one of those tasks, depending on the result of whatever the task produced, will create another step of the flow. So to orchestrate all of that, obviously you can do it with code if you want to, but that's going to be really complex and it's going to take you a long time. The idea behind Prompt Flow is simplifying. So we want to simplify it, and we want to give you a graphic interface in order to do that. And these processes might require use of maybe GPT-4 for some tasks, but there's some tasks that it will require a much smaller organization-specific LLM, open source LLM. So we need to orchestrate using of these LLMs, GPT-4 and others, and fetching information from different places. That is exactly what Prompt Flow does. Also, we understand that although GPT-4 is absolutely amazing, it is not going to be the only LLM that organizations use. There is a place for smaller LLMs that you can fine-tune to your own task, or maybe you're going to have partners creating an industry LLM for you, so for banking or for engineering or for whatever. And you might want to use these LLMs because GPT-4 just doesn't have these capabilities or is not fine-tuned enough for these capabilities. Also, if you want to tune an LLM, if you try to do it with GPT-4, that is going to cost you a lot of money because GPT-4 is a big beast. Smaller open source LLMs will be definitely way more cost effective to fine-tune if that is what you want to do. What Microsoft is doing with the model catalog is you're going to have a catalog of the leading open source LLM in the industry that you can just choose. You can bring your own LLM, you can fine-tune it, you can also maintain it because obviously you need to run it on something. So all of those tasks will be done for you by the model catalog. Azure AI Studio is actually something that is already out there. A lot of customers are using it, and it's basically the playground to test various tasks with the LLM. So, if you want to test prompts, so, we want to test how the LLM reacts to different instructions, that is exactly where you want to do it. But we are introducing more capability to the Azure AI Studio. As an example, bring your own data. So ability to ask questions about data, which is private to you, so company data. Augmenting the LLM with data that is not publicly available, right? And that is really, really important for almost any corporate use case. I will show you a couple of examples. But up until now, the way to do it was we had to do it with code. with Azure AI Studio, we're simplifying it. So the whole idea behind all of these capabilities is we're not introducing anything, I'd say, radically new, because you could do all of these things with code. But what we are doing with these tools is accelerating the time that it takes you to build your own Copilot, instead of you having to set a group of developers to develop the code to do all of these things.
That's a quick question. On the prompt flow and the model catalog, is it only specific for orchestrating the LLMs, whether from a prompt flow or a model catalog perspective, or any kind of AI ML models you can orchestrate using the prompt flow or the model catalog?
The model catalog is focused around LLMs, but the prompt flow, yes. Prompt flow, it's extensible. So you can use it with literally anything. It's just an API call, right?
Okay.
The one thing that I wanted to, and I think this was discussed earlier, is AI safety, right? So I think if I recall the last 20 meetings that I had with customers about AI, one of the first things that come up is concern, because generative AI is unpredictable, right? So we cannot predict, like with machine learning models that we dealt with up until now, we cannot predict what the result is going to be exactly. And in some cases, we have the concept of hallucinations. I was speaking today to a bank here in Netherlands, and they told me that they started using OpenAI to summarize calls. And they said, we have a problem because some of those calls, the transcription is not great because the quality of the audio is not great. And when we feed it to the AI to summarize, sometimes we get hallucinations, which means that the AI summarizes or includes in the summary things that weren't said in the conversation, right? Now, that is just one use case. In fact, when you summarize a call, that's an internal use case. It's not consumer facing, although it's using consumer data, but the result stays internal in the company. What happens when we want to open it to consumers? That becomes even 10 times more risky, right? And our company brand is at stake. This is exactly what the Azure AI Content Safety Platform is there to resolve. So starting from the very, very basic, making sure that we moderate the content. So we don't want any harmful language, racial slur, gender bias. All of those things are dealt with the foundation of the Azure AI Content Safety, which is content moderation. Moving on from there, we have 3 more layers of safety in order to ensure that we put the right guardrails for the model to produce the results that we wanted to put. So as an example, if we want to make sure that when we ask questions, the answers are given only from the data that we have internally, not from the publicly available knowledge that the model has, we can do it with Azure OpenAI Content Safety because we can give it guardrails. Some of it, admittedly, is just guidelines on how you do prompt engineering, and some of it is tools that we're going to have in this platform. So I think for any generative AI application, Copilot, this is almost the most important part of the application because it will determine whether or not we can actually release it to whatever user group it is, whether internal or external.
The source of it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Gartner. Eventually, even let's say Gartner or IDC will start using GenAI.
Mm-hmm.
So what's Microsoft's stance on certifying anything? Because we can live in a world where everything is generative. How will we certify? Even sources will use GenAI to do that.
So you mean, just to understand your question, so you mean, how do we know whether content was generated by AI or not? Or how do we make sure that if people ask questions, we give them a link to the source where the information came from?
So we can give them a link and it will work at the moment because in Gartner, someone is writing. So we go with the person, he's the analyst, he's writing, so we trust the content.
Yeah.
Eventually, those contents will be generated by AI, for example.
Even Gartner will generate the content using maybe AI, that's what he said.
So it's actually a really important point because and we also recognize that a lot of the content in the future is going to be generated by AI because people are already doing that, right? So We have developed technologies internally, so it's research that Microsoft is doing currently, and I did see some kind of announcement whether or not it's going to come in a product, but we are going to release these capabilities to our customers to be able to determine whether or not something is original human content or AI generated, right? And I think, if you ask me, but this is my personal opinion, not a Microsoft opinion. My personal opinion is that this is going to be demanded by the regulator. And the way it's going to be achieved is by crypto. So you're going to insert some kind of blockchain code into every piece of text, and that is going to tell you whether it was AI generated or human generated, and it's going to be demanded by regulators. I think Europeans are probably going to be the first, if you ask me, and potentially the Americas, China, maybe never.
I think maybe the certification is a gray area. I think because I don't think any technology companies, at least for the matter, at least in the current state, want to get into the certification business, right? So it is like, okay, this content is there. I'm sourcing it from Gartner. Maybe Gartner is generating using Gen AI, maybe sourcing from somewhere. But then, as long as you are saying source Gartner, and if you trust Gartner, then I think it is left there. But nobody is going to say whether this content was generated by Gartner and whether it was right or
so. Look, we start simple, right? The thing with this is that it is so new, and it's a fast moving technology area. It really is moving. There's a member of my team that went to paternity leave, is German, so they get like a month. Sorry, 6 months. So he was away for 6 weeks, and by the time that he came back, everything moved on. And it's 6 weeks. 6 weeks is nothing in technology timeline, but with this, everything is moving very, very fast. And I actually liked Gregory's slide earlier with the two shops. What was it? It was good enough shop, right? And
safety.
Yeah.
So I think, and the same applies also when we implement that at Microsoft as well, by the way. But I think these are discussions we're having all the time with our customers now as well. So how do you make this chain of trust within your data?
Yeah.
That's so thanks for the question.
I think that's where maybe like the black blockchain kind of, it will get established.
It will happen. It will happen, and it will be introduced into the products. The question is when, not if. So, but okay. So we want to start somewhere, right? So yes.
I have a different question triggered by Copilot, which I hope, as a business user of Microsoft applications, that a business user, most of the time for the introduction of new applications, a business user needs training. And what we talk about when we talk about AI, what was mentioned before, it's about raising the right question.
Yeah, that's true.
And for instance, if we look at reporting, if I look at Power BI, Microsoft tools, would such a Copilot help in not even having to know the all deep down functionality of Power BI, but just, I want to raise the questions.
Yes.
I want to build a report that should be in it. I want to formulate research, make it so.
Yes, the answer is yes, and it's being built as we speak. But as you can imagine, to get something like this publicly available takes huge amount of testing, right? So that is exactly what the product team is doing at the moment. But they absolutely have a roadmap to release a tool where you in natural language can say, I just want to see a report about my sales in these regions, and please explain to me why we have a dip in that area, and just use natural language to ask questions about data. And it will, what the tool will do is it will generate the right query to Power BI to fetch the data from a database in order to present the answer to you.
Easy.
I don't doubt that query can be generated, but the output be all each time different. So this is like reliability and also explainability is the issue.
That is exactly why the team is doing so much testing. Because, like you said, we are in the beginning. We don't know, and you need to make sure that you tune the prompts that Power BI will create to the GPT-4. You need to make sure that the instruction to GPT-4 is a good one, and that is exactly where the game is. It's not about Power BI. It's about the instruction that you give GPT-4 to generate that code. No, but again, we have to take it into context of what does it replace. So when you have either a dashboard that you create or nothing, then we kind of move into the nothing area and give you something, right? But then how do you create those controls? I leave it to the Power BI team. They probably have better answers on how exactly they create the predictability that you're looking for. But it's future product, so I don't have answers.
Perspective, right? It's the same age-old problem. For example, software as a service, when it came 5 years back or 10 years back, every programmer said, hey, it's a black box for us, right? But over the period of time, the benefits will come out, and then people start adopting. There is a pilot who will pick that SaaS, and then somebody else will do.
Yeah.
OpenAI will definitely be a black box. But I think as an industry, we are trying to be more towards the value of it rather than the complexity. If the value outweighs the complexity, that's what we are aiming at. But if it doesn't, then definitely we would love to open that platform for people.
Look, I work across many organizations in EMEA, but my role is EMEA role. So I work with our largest organizations across EMEA. And what I noticed as a pattern is because this is so scary, right? This is new. We don't, like you say, it's a black box. I don't know what it's going to do. So there is a journey that I see customers that I work with going through, right? They start internally. Definitely don't start with a consumer-facing use case, right? We don't, because it's going to take you forever until you learn the technology, you feel comfortable with it, and you feel comfortable enough to open it to your consumers. Actually, some customers did it. I think they're very brave. But what we see a lot of organizations start with is this. Search Copilot, building their own Search Copilot. Why? Gregory said it earlier. We spend on an average week, and information workers spend the whole day looking for information. You all had that problem, right? You're looking for information in your own organization. You have a search platform, maybe SharePoint, I admit. You type a query and you get 200 results. The document that you're looking for maybe is results 156 down. And you need to start changing the query and then maybe clicking on some filters to try and reduce the result set. And eventually what you do, you ask your colleagues, do you know where I can find this document? That is the opposite of productivity, right? And then in November last year, ChatGPT came and everyone asked questions and got answers, right? Okay, some admittedly, small percentage wrong. And that's what we call hallucinations because the model was trained on a lot of data from the internet, which also includes inaccuracies. But we got an answer, and the answer was in beautiful language, English or otherwise, right? But in the enterprise, we don't have that experience. That is exactly what the Search Copilot is there to solve. We can now answer questions from our own documentation internally in the company, and speaking about guardrails, we can make sure we know how to build the guardrails to make sure that there's no hallucinations. We only answer the information from the text that we have available internally in natural language, right? And we can get a link to the document, even to the paragraph where the information came from. So do I need to search now hundreds of documents and read them to figure out where the answer that I'm looking for? We can completely change the employee experience. So going back to how organizations go through this journey, this is not a risky use case. Why? Because you always get a link to the document. So if the document is wrong, it's wrong. Fine. But it's better than what you have today, because today you have a platform that gives you irrelevant results. It's just the sickness of keyword search platforms, right? We know that. So this is a great place to start. You understand the technology, you play around with it, you understand the limitations of the technology and the benefits of the technology, and it's easy to build. And actually, Microsoft built a solution called Chat GPT on your data. Based on this, we have code repos that you can deploy easily that can give you 90% of the platform. So it's not a difficult thing to do, right? Then customer support. And again, I know it sounds like we're going consumer facing, but we can do many things to improve processes in customer support before we go consumer facing. As an example, telcos already implemented this. Any customer or any organization that has a big customer support business, that is a huge cost center, right? Operating a big call center is very, very expensive. We know that we pay for every minute of agent call about $1. Simple use case. Agents needs to summarize what happened what was agreed between the customer and the agent. Specifically because if we call again for the same problem, if we don't have a record of what happened, then we give bad customer service. So agents that do this either do it during the call while they're on the call with the customer, makes the call longer, more money, or they do it after the call, which means that they don't tend to the queue of calls that they have, and they sit down and do something that actually an agent shouldn't do. It's a manual. It's not using the agent. I'm specifically with operations. I was speaking to a call center operator. They said we have a 100% attrition every year, right? So, they said to me, we stopped doing this manually because it was so inconsistent. We couldn't use the data, right? Each agent got their own data from the conversation, and sometimes the point that they summarized weren't important. It was irrelevant, right? So we can use OpenAI to do that. With OpenAI, if we give the right instruction to OpenAI, that is a really simple use case to do it. Also, call center analytics. If we extract the same information from each call, let's say we have 7 million calls a year, and I've worked with a call center much bigger than that. So we can collect information like what was the call about, so classifying it. What were the main products or services that we mentioned? Was the problem resolved? Where did the call originate? Agent, chat, whatever. We can collect all of this information and we can structure it into something that we can pass to a database like JSON files or whatever. And we can visualize that. So we have a holistic view of what's happening in our call center. That is invaluable to call center operators because that means that they can optimize processes that are not going well. If you have a spike in billing calls, you know that you have a billing process that is not going well. Knowledge we spoke about, developer, self-explanatory. Like Gregory said, we can reduce developer time by 50% potentially.
This is all independent of which technology you use, right? If you work with Salesforce or Dynamics or whatever, it is sort of plug-in way of...
We deal with text. Where the text comes from doesn't matter. Another interesting one is automating manual processes. Worked with an insurance company. They said to me, look, we get bond documents. We have thousands of them every day. And we have a team, and their job is to get the form in PDF format, look through the information, and unfortunately, each form has a completely different layout. So they need to look for the information that they need, which is mainly numbers, dates, values, names of companies, and key it into a system. OpenAI can easily automate that. So, and these are just a couple of ideas. The more I work with customers, the more crazy ideas I hear about, but very, very useful. So as an example, I work with a gaming company. They have announcements in the game. It's a football game, and they realized that actually their game is mostly for the male population, and they figured out, you know what, actually we have to change it because, well, it's the right thing to do, and also because of the popularity of women football. So they estimated that in order to feminize the announcements or the strings that the game has, they needed to spend 6 million, and it would take them 18 months. Why? Because they operate in 18 languages. We showed them how with OpenAI we can actually do it, but we didn't just ask OpenAI to take the strings and apply them to females. We also wanted to make sure that we also used OpenAI to test whether or not the outcome was good. So we created a feedback loop based on OpenAI in order to teach OpenAI how to do it. Because every time you give OpenAI an example of something that is correct, it is going to do the job better, right? So, and that's, I would have never thought about that, right? That's something that came from one of our customer, a gaming company. So what I'm trying to say is the imagination is the limit here, not really the technology. But just to bring it to life, I wanted to show you a couple of demos. So I need to switch to a demo screen, and I'll share my screen as well. Okay. So remember I spoke to you about search, right? So we created like a really, really simple demo. This is just, think about like Google for the enterprise. And what I've done here, I uploaded, just so we can show you something that maybe everyone understands. I just uploaded a document. Oh, thank you. Just make it bigger. So yeah, so I uploaded the document. It's a 60-page document, publicly available. It's a study that was done in UK about housing. So, you know, I don't know if you know, in UK we have a housing crisis. Prices are crazy. And this study deals with why, what government policies we have to try and deal with it. Are they effective? They're not effective. 60-page of text, right? So I'm not going to go into the detail of how we do it, because obviously 60-page of text is way over the limitation of what the model can deal with in one API call. But we have a way of breaking the document and enabling search. But the interesting thing here is we want to provide a Chat GPT-like experience to our internal employees, right? So I'm going to start simple, and I'm going to show you some things. So let's say describe the UK housing crisis. Now, the thing I like about this is that I can tell OpenAI how to structure the answer, right? So I can say, I want a really detailed answer. I want a very short answer. So I can say something like, in a few words. Oops. And OpenAI does it. Now, what I wanted to point out, yes, I know it's one document, but you can extrapolate this to 100,000 document or 1 million document. It will operate the same as long as they're more or less in the same topic, right? But you can see it just gave me a few words. Now, what I wanted to highlight is from that 60-page document, you can see here, this is the context. So the platform only surfaced the relevant information to OpenAI, all of these paragraphs, but OpenAI takes these paragraphs, analyzes them, looks at the question, says, okay, to answer that question, I only need to use this information, and it will generate an answer. So it doesn't copy the text from the paragraphs. It actually understands the text and generates an answer, right? So let's make it a little bit more complex and say, instead of a few words, I'm going to say, provide some data points. Now, I'm using a really interesting capability that GPT-4 has, and that's its ability to understand semantics. So it understands, I want some data, I want some numbers, right? So it will look at the text again, and in the answer, it will include numbers in order to give me the right information. And because these are demo environments, they are extremely slow and prone to errors. But you can see that now. Let me make it a little bit bigger, actually, for you guys to see. So you can see now I have the same answer. It explains what the UK housing crisis is, but it also includes numbers of why and how many people and how many renters and all this kind of information that we have here. I can do stuff like, I want to know what this document is about. So let's say what government policies were mentioned in this document. And it will give me the answer. And again, I can structure it. I cannot ask it to answer it in Dutch if I want. I cannot ask it to answer it for an 11-year-old to understand. I can do whatever I want in terms of structuring the answer without having to train the AI, which is what I love about this thing. Let me show you something else. Let's look at this. So, actually, you know what? I'm going to show you. Let me tell you the story first, and I'll show you something I find really interesting. So, I was speaking to an insurance company in UK, and they deal with the pension funds. And they said to me, look, the board would like to see, as an experimentation, just to understand capability, they want to understand if AI can identify a vulnerable person, so someone who's struggling financially. So like in the rest of Europe, in the UK, we also have cost of living crisis. So there's a lot of people now struggling more than ever. And the board, because it's their responsibility, wanted to help the agents that are speaking to these people or someone that is struggling to see if there's any signs in the conversation that can flag that this is a vulnerable person to create more empathy, right? Now, a couple of things to say. They gave us a call recording, but that call recording was fake, so it was created by 2 employees, no PII data. It's not something that they intended to deliver because there's a lot of ethical issues about it, so they haven't even had that discussion. All we're doing here is just testing the capability of the AI to do something, right? I'm not suggesting that there should be a use case, but I think what came up is GPT-4's ability to reason was actually, it surprised me. So when they asked me the question, I said, you know what, I don't know. Never done it before. They gave me the recording, we transcribed it with the speech-to-text technology that we have. It's called speech-to-text, funny enough. Then we took the text and I asked OpenAI to do the following things. I'll show you. So this is the text, the conversation transcription. So basically what's happening in this conversation, I don't want you to now read it, we don't have time. This lady is calling, the agent is asking, how can I help? And she says, look, I'm struggling, I'm paying a little bit to a pension fund, I'm struggling to pay at the moment, what are my options? The agents collect a whole lot of data to understand who she is, and then she's offering her some options. Reduced payments, premium holiday for 6 or 12 months or indefinite, and then she chooses an option. I'm describing a very simple conversation, but like you can see, there's a lot of noise. So there's a lot of words here that are irrelevant to what I just described, and actually it's information that we don't need. And the question is, can OpenAI identify vulnerability? Yes, no. And also just collect information from unstructured text. And what I also wanted to point out, if you look at this transcript, there is no definition of who's the agent and who's the consumer. And the beautiful thing about GPT-4 is that it really understands things from context. So you don't need to tell it that kind of stuff. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically collecting 11 points of information from this document. And I'm also telling OpenAI to structure it into a JSON file. So think about what we're doing here. I'm taking completely unstructured information, structuring it into something that the machine can understand, and then I can pass it to whatever. It can be customer records, it can be a database, it can be whatever we need to do with this next. So what I'm telling OpenAI, and remember OpenAI, you give it instructions as if you're speaking to a human. I'm telling it, you must extract the following information from the phone conversation below. I need the reason for the call. I don't know if you remember, Gregory told you, it's a multitasking technology. It can do many things in one API call. So the first task is classification. The second is entity extraction. I want the policy number. I want the first name, surname, date of birth, address. And the seventh one is where I think OpenAI showed some really interesting capability, and I'll show you in a minute. Vulnerable person flag. So I want OpenAI to tell me if it thinks that we are dealing with a vulnerable person, yes, no. And then because it was a test, I didn't know why the AI would do it, and if it done it properly. I asked OpenAI to explain to me why the policyholder is classified as a vulnerable, if it is, right? And then, we're collecting more information about what options were presented, what options were selected, and the summary. So I tend to do live demos. So I'm going to take all of this, and I'm going to show you how we do it with OpenAI. So I'm going to clear the chat. So what I've done here is we have this is just a playground. It's to test ideas. It's not a beautiful interface. But what I'm doing here is I gave the context of the conversation in the system message. So that's like the context for OpenAI. And now I'm pasting the instructions right here. And I'm going to click enter. So these are my instructions. And now I'm going to wait for GPT-4 to do it. So you can see it starts creating a JSON file with answer. Let's make it bigger. I'm just waiting for it to finish, and I'll take you through it. So look what it's done. So the reason for the call was struggling with payments. Now, granted, in enterprise scenarios, we probably want to give it a set criteria for classification. I just gave it like an open creative license to classify it. It extracted the policy number, the name, the date of birth, the street, and it said, yes, she is vulnerable. And the explanation was, Angela is struggling financially and unsure when her situation will change, leading to difficulties in paying her pension premiums. A couple of things to note here. I didn't tell OpenAI GPT-4 what is a vulnerable person. We can make it even better if we give it some classification as what do we consider as a vulnerable person. But I think it's amazing that this technology has the reasoning ability to tell me, look, it is a vulnerable person, and it gives me a good reasoning because she's struggling to financially. So, and the rest is, again, summary and what options were presented to her, what she selected, and so on. But what I'm saying here is we have now a technology that is capable of extracting information from text. It can be a document, it can be a transcript of a conversation from context. We don't need to train it. Think about developing these solutions before we had GPT-4. We had to train machine learning technologies, transformer models, to do each task separately. So if we wanted to extract date of birth, name, policy number, we had to train these technologies with a lot of data on how to do these tasks. With OpenAI, I don't. I just tried you. I just gave it an instruction and it did it. I didn't need to train anything. So we can obviously, this is a really, really simple example, and it's the basis for doing things better. But the better you write the instruction, the more information you give it, the better your results are going to be. And if you have complex business problems, the Copilot stack is going to help you to orchestrate all of these tasks and do something really complex. And yes, your limit for using this technology is literally your imagination. I'm really interested to see what you guys are going to come up with. So interestingly, and I never expected it when we started working with this technology, banks. So they are the first that jumped on this technology. I had a really interesting presentation to a board meeting of a large investment company in Europe. They came to London, and so we had a very similar conversation to the one I had with you today. And at the end of the conversation, the CEO said, "Okay, what am I going to do? We have two choices. One, we are going to sit and see what the industry does, because we are highly regulated, very highly regulated, and probably going to be more regulated. And it's a big risk to introduce these technologies for us. Or we can take this bull by the horns and do it now, because it will give us competitive advantage." And I think the resounding answer from them, so I was just listening to the conversation, right? I wasn't involved in this conversation. It was entirely them discussing it between themselves. But the resounding result of that conversation was, we have to do it now, because if we don't, we're going to lose competitive advantage, and then we have to claw back. And that is what I see not only with obviously highly regulated industries, but almost every organization that we speak to.
I give now the floor to Pablo, who will discuss about the use case, and then we go into the kind of panel discussion, where you have all the opportunity to ask questions. Pablo, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Gregory. Okay, I hope you have rested a bit and are ready to keep listening about ChatGPT stuff. So I am Pablo. I'm a service and interaction here at Cognizant Benelux, service and interaction designer. And I've always been interested on building the things I design, because I think that when you build something, you see how it works and you put it in front of people is the best way you can really understand the impact of your design. So when ChatGPT appeared in November, I was super excited, because all of a sudden I could bring my prototyping skills, the things I designed, to the next level, coding in Python, in React. And what I'm going to show you the demo of today, I think it's an example of how this technology really has the power to democratize all sorts of skills. And we can, as we said, the limit is the imagination. So when you are thinking to integrate generative AI into your workflows, I think it's good to start from what you know well. And in my case, as a designer, is the user-centric design or innovation funnel. We always start by exploring the problem. Then we decide what to fix, and then we come up with a solution, test it, and iteratively improve it. And across the whole process, we are always trying to learn from users. So at the beginning, with explorative research, we are trying to understand what people do. And at the end, once that we have come up with a solution with validation research, we are trying to understand if our solution is able to solve the problem we identified. So with every new technology and new product, there is a risk, and user-centric design, or this continuous feedback, help us the risk and release products with more certainty that they are going to be valuable and used. And we have kind of different approaches to learn from users. One is qualitative, right? User interviews and usability tests allow us to understand why people do things, but at a small scale. So it's not always, we don't know if this is generalizable. And on the other hand, we can do quantitative methods like A/B testing or user analytics, where we understand what is going on, but not necessarily why. So to really de-risk, we need to find a combination of these quantitative and qualitative studies to understand what is happening and why it's happening. And I thought, since AI is basically like a machine that is able to understand human language and write human language at a scale of a machine, I thought there could be something here in the field of understanding people. So improving the scale at which we do in qualitative studies, and improving the quality of insight we get from quantitative ones. So I'm going to show you a video, which is an example of usability testing moderated by AI, but I hope that you can also imagine this type of process along the whole innovation cycle. Can we make it big as well?
It's like coverage. I would like to see at first time what does this coverage look like. Really follow up for you.
Can you describe in more detail how would you like to see the coverage information so that is clear at first sight?
I would say that I've seen another problem in the past that you have a link that shows like involved what's covered and what's not covered in everything, let's say box. So that's what I'm looking really. I would have like a those.
Hello, this is Pablo from the research team. We have just more than 200 feedback entries from our participants. We can see how the AI has automatically generated 9 clusters to promote the observations we got from the testing sessions. And this is search by one of these auto-generated clusters. In this case, all this group is about new value scheme confusion. So users who have expressed confusion with this term, and we can see all the insights on the left that are related to this topic. Another thing we can do is a semantic search. We are going to write users to find differences. We can see how we have selected on the observations that have scientifically discovered. So these users said that they find unclear the coverages. And here we can find at the end observation number 1, which is what our participant in the video just said.
Stop. Okay, so I hope that was inspiring, not only for this particular use case of usability testing, but also how can we all of a sudden have conversations with people and learn from them at a huge scale. And also be able, we are not limited by the amount of unstructured data because we can automatically organize it, cluster it, and process it to learn from it. So this is useful for usability testing, but also for imagine having conversation in Google reviews instead, or surveys, right? How this revolutionizes surveys instead of being static, being dynamic, and really digging deeper into what people think. So I'm going to talk a bit quickly about the process of coming up with this type of generative products, which usually, again, once you have chosen your workflow, it's a matter of dividing that into a set of tasks. In this case, it was for usability testing. I thought like, okay, first you need to listen what the user said, then you ask follow-up question, then you write observations, and then once you have a bunch of user data collected, you cluster it and analyze it. So let's look at the follow-up question task. How did I build that automatically? So for each task, you can think of it as an input, a process, and an output. And a process, in the most basic sense, is a decision and an action that transforms a given input into a desirable output. So the question is, can we rely on a large language model to take this decision reliably? And the answer is in the context of the decision. So the context we provide at the LLM. So let's look at this example, generating follow-up questions. I was trying to think, okay, what is the information that a researcher considers when deciding what question to ask? Of course, he's going to listen to what the person says. Then he's going to also observe the person, right? Like visual, like non-verbal cues. Where is the person clicking? What's the person doing? What they speak? The research question of the study So what are they trying to find? And also insights from other sessions. So it will remember, okay, last day I had another session and people were concerned about this. So maybe I bring this up again. So the good thing is that we have access to all this, most of it, right? We can transcript the user voice via Whisper from OpenAI or Microsoft solutions. The insights from other session, we store the observations in a vector database that we can then retrieve with semantic search. And the research question, of course, we can ask researchers what they are trying to look for. The context is maybe an area of improvement, but that's why, we are still not in replacing. I don't think there is a point of replacing moderated tests, but augmenting the unmoderated ones. So when we developed, I think all the speakers have talked about it before, the real challenge of this is on identifying what is the context necessary for the LLM to take the right decision. So research, user testing is important to understand what is the context of a decision. And then we need to build those computer systems, cognitive architectures that fit the right context to the large language model. So the prompt engineering, we need to dynamically curate it. And this is impossible to get right at the first time. It's an iterative process. So we learn this, there's a lot of testing. We figure out things to improve. In the case of this solution, areas of improvement are fine-tuning the large language model with professional researcher answers, so it's better at it. Improving the way it retrieves memories. So right now it's a bit simple, like it just gets observations from others that are related to the transcript via semantic search. But it would be much better if we would make hierarchical memory retrieval so that the memory is stored as lower level transcript, medium level observations, and higher level insights, which are based on the clusters of observations. And the last, give multimodal capabilities of input. So also input heat maps or click-through behavior so that the LLM behaves more similar to how a researcher would take the decision. So I'm out of time, but I think I made it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So I think I will ask some questions, or if you have a question, you will be able to ask it. But before we start that, I'd like to ask a question to you, and because how will we now ensure that everybody will start using this Gen AI perspective?
You mean in terms of adoption?
Yes.
First, I'm going to give a little introduction about myself. So my name is Paula. I work in Cognizant as a design research lead. So I come from the design department. And as you can imagine, adoption is one of the main elements of any application, interaction product that you're creating. But specifically in this case, I think it's important to recognize the holistic approach that companies need to take in adopting this technology. Today, we have seen the approach from a technology perspective. I think that all of you are also wondering, first question, from a strategic or an operational perspective, how my company is going to, let's say, deal with this big shift. But we also need to take into account the human perspective in terms of the employees, how employees are going to feel confident using Gen AI technologies, how are they going to basically trust the information that they're going to receive from this. And from an end user perspective, although most of you have been using, I think, Chat GPT, there's a big element of trust in terms of the interactions that you want end users to take with the large language models, but there's a larger dimension of complexity in terms of like, are end users sure that we are using their information in the right way? Are users also confident that they are not going to be their information is going to be used in a proper way? So this human perspective is a very important aspect of implementing large language models in your company. And here in Cognizant, we are also taking this into account. We are implementing design thinking tools into our generative AI accelerator. So it means that we're working in partnership with our colleagues from data science to create something that is more holistic, so that we're taking not only strategic factors, but also human factors in the math.
Great. Thank you, Paula, for your answer. Anybody already a question? I have 10 backup questions, no problem. But Specific question that you want to ask to the experts.
Thank you. What I see is we see a lot of technologies which you describe, generative AI, automation, and then Copilot also within the automation. So a lot is possible. What I would like to know is how to combine those technologies, because each technology on its own is already a challenge, but the real benefit comes when we are integrating all these different technologies. So how do you see that happening to go from separate technologies into a real hyper-automation way of working?
Great question. Who wants to answer it?
The punt, but I think I can use my own voice.
Yeah.
It's loud enough. So that is exactly what we are attempting to solve at Microsoft with the Copilot stack. So giving the tool set surrounding these LLM technologies to build applications that are safe, that can do complex tasks. So not just one task, multiple tasks to achieve a certain process, whether it's consumer facing or not, it doesn't matter. That you don't have to build those integrations that you were talking about, because that is what is going to take probably, 60-70% of your time. The LLM itself is easy, right? We know how to get it to do what we want, more or less. Okay, there's some consideration there, but the LLM, you can test it and you get an immediate result. But to combine, fetching data from something else and orchestrating complex processes, that is exactly what the Copilot stack is attempting to resolve. I have to say, though, being realistic, super early days, right? It's kind of almost impossible to predict where this thing is going to go, because it is so transformative. It really is. I've been in technology business for a while, and I have never seen a phenomenon like this with anything. Not BI, not AI, not machine learning models, not even the transformer models, which were able to do really clever things like, mimic human voice or whatever. This is something on a completely different scale. So what we know today is probably only scratching the surface. Like, think of it as an iceberg that is hiding that we don't know about.
So can I maybe ask now also, Sean, can you respond on that? Because we have now from a technology partner an answer. I would like now to give the hands to from a technology agnostic perspective. So what's your answer, Sean?
I think there are going to be complexities in your technology landscape. Let's not hide away from it. The business is demanding more. The business is screaming for it. But we already exist in this complex technical infrastructure that we live in. I think there's some really good practices out there, making sure that you have very well governed data infrastructure. We have a number of our partners like Databricks and Snowflake, particularly Databricks, have an excellent data cataloging capabilities that enable you to actually understand what is the data and how you control your data in your landscape. That allows you then to curate that data into generative AI model in a controlled fashion. You have already MLOps environment running in your real estate again. So, you evolve from DevOps to MLOps, etc. So I do think that this is just a step in the evolution, but part of this is the governance that you already have in place to make sure that your data is controlled, secured, compliant, etc. I think this just adds a layer, a layer that speeds things up, but not necessarily introduces that huge level of complexity. There's already conversations about if you're on a data fabric, how do you go to a data mesh? All these things are orchestration that enables your Gen AI LLMs to go better. So kind of like got to go a step back, get that in control, which I think most of you have, and then go forward with this new technology. That's at least how we're seeing it from a data and analytics point of view.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We talk about Gen AI. It's a fancy world. We appreciate what it is offering, but being a devil's advocate, we can also look at the other side. What are the problems it is facing or it has faced in past? For example, we as organization, we trust something that we have seen or built, right? LLM is something that has already been built by somebody who validated it. Because we have model validators in our organizations who even validate a simple logistic regression or a linear regression model, right? It's a simple arithmetic equation. Bias it has introduced, because when we read a book, it's been written by an author. It can have the perception of the author. So it can have the influence of the writer. When you talk about a narrative voice, it can have the influence of the person who speaks. So how do you think you are taking care of this bias and the fairness? Because in financial organizations, we have to be very careful about the bias and fairness. So
maybe I'll take this. I'll take a stab at that and pass it on. So there's a concept called AI agent. I think you can hear me, right?
Yeah, but I think it's for the video people.
Oh, for the video people. Sorry, it's very important that for the video people. So there's a concept called AI agents. As you know, with Cognizant, we have something called Neuro platform. We see the world, and I'm just adding to the complexity question that was posed earlier. We see the world as we evolve that's composed of multi-foundational models with multi-LLMs that needs to have ethics and trust as a core. This is where we see the AI agents coming in. The AI agents that will be deployed in organizations will have things like, is the data coming from the right place? Is it maxed? Does it have a toxicity detection, as you were talking about before? So we see the world of the future of this kind of getting more into the general AI world, where a lot of our enterprise are running on AI models, and controlling these models, trusting these models are going to be the responsibility of what we call AI agents, which essentially think of them as model validation, but an automated model validation. And not to plug Cognizant, but we are rolling out a platform called Neuro, which will actually begin to address some of these concerns. And hopefully that will make a lot of the investments many of you guys are going to make in the future to be, controlled, safe, compliant, etc. So that's kind of the view of Cognizant. I would love to hear the view of my colleague.
So to answer your question, and I'm going to start by telling you that we don't have all the answers because this is so new. But we have some of the answers. So there's a couple, you need to break it to problems. First problem is the use of language. Because when you have generative AI, like you say, it's a black box. You can't predict exactly what it's going to say. So the first thing that you need to do is moderate the language itself and make sure that the use of language is safe and not harmful. So, people will try to break it. I'm sure you've seen on the news people trying to jailbreak Chat GPT and to make it say things that are offensive, right? So how do we do that? How do we moderate content and make sure that the content is safe? There are solutions for that. Content moderation is a well-trodden path, right? So we know how to do it. Beyond that, you go one level up. You want to make sure that the content is beyond safe, is also fair, right? So removing bias. Unfortunately, it's not a deterministic task like you have with machine learning, where you can say, I have full control on the data that I'm using to train, and therefore I can make sure that the data is not biased. That's how we did it with machine learning, right? As a data scientist. With LLMs, there's a different world. So the data science methods that we had and we deployed with machine learning models are not applicable anymore. However, these models are very, you can tame them. So as much as they are a black box, there's a lot of things that we can do in the use of instruction to give it guardrails. And also we have some parameters that we can play with, like temperature as an example. And we can use these parameters in order to make sure that the content is safe. There's in prompt engineering, there's a methodology that we always advise our customers to follow in providing these guardrails and giving the AI instructions in what is safe, what is fair, and just the more information you give it about all of these things, and it's a big topic. I'm not going to cover it now. The message that I'm trying to convey here, there are ways of doing it. However, like I said earlier, my advice to any organization that wants to use these technologies, try it in safe use cases first, where the bank's brand or compliance is not at risk, so internally facing, and then go consumer.
Be a very atypical moderator because I also will give an answer. And I think it's on this slide here, new rules to be developed. 3 years ago, we as Cognizant developed a report of the future jobs. And what you see there, bias specialists, ethical sourcing managers, data detectives, and effectively product management roles. So we will see the need of a lot of new type of roles popping up into our organization because we cannot keep on exporting certain problems. We will need to handle them. And like I said, being responsible AI, define ethical norms for AI in our organization. Maybe that's a job as such, also to put that into place, to govern that, to manage that. Any? You?
Just to add into let's say that layer of uncontrollable parts that at some point is also controllable from as much as Microsoft and other companies are investing in making these large language models better. There's an element of fine-tuning that is in control in your companies, and that is also in relationship to what you can feed in from your, let's say, how you want these large language models to behave, but what is information from your users you're inputting into that. And our approach to that is also to embed user testing into the way that you are looking into your large language models, because it's a way to control, fine-tune, but also make sure that from a human and an ethical perspective, you're doing as much as possible to make the result closer to what you want to do. So there's one part that is I think controlled and as much as possible from the big organizations, but from your perspective, from your company perspective, the more you can architecture that context that you're inputting into the model and making also sure that you're taking into account the human perspective into that, I think that is also helping into providing a better controlled and human and non-biased answer.
Great. We still want to respect the time, so I think two more questions.
Needs to ask questions.
Two more questions. So who?
Somebody from the side.
Don't be shy. We're also learning every day.
There you go.
My question is, all the organizations are talking about it. They do have some forums internally to understand how it is. But if at all any organization has to embrace this, what should be the journey look like? So, yeah, of course, we can partner with Microsoft or Cognizant. That is one way. But internally, if the organization has to be ready, how do you prepare for this journey?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I consider it very important a holistic approach into this. We see that this is moving at speed and that we need to take very much a lot of factors into account to be able to make a good decision, right? From a strategic perspective, from a human perspective, operations, etc. The approach that we're taking is based on design thinking. Design thinking, we usually need some tools to be able to coordinate people that come from different disciplines, and they need to make also decisions quick and have a shared understanding of the problem that they are solving. In this case, the very first stage that we're proposing is to support our clients to think holistically, embed the information that you already have from your company, and plug in also the expertise from our own data science people and design people in helping you to move in fast into the process of deciding what use case to take, but also what decisions are important to take into account from all the different disciplines' perspectives. And I think that I was also, just before we started this event, I was talking with one of your colleagues from Microsoft, and I was commenting that I came from a design department, and he was very excited because he said co-creation is one of the main elements that we have been using to create also this. So I think that there's like a human perspective that we still need to embed and embrace and use as much as possible, empowered, let's say, by technology, but that can help us in making the decisions faster and move as quickly as possible in this journey.
Yeah. Any compliments there?
So from experience, what I've seen as a repeating pattern in organizations that are thinking about it, and I think there's almost like two approaches. So one approach is IT is taking control over that and guarding, right? So basically saying, we're going to create some kind of COE, you come to us with ideas, we're going to vet these ideas and potentially go to POCs, and if something goes through all these stages, we can consider moving to production. What I've seen, the slight issue in this approach is the business is kind of outside the loop. And because they don't have a full understanding of the potential, the process is much longer than the business would have hoped for, right? An alternative approach is start from the top, board level. And the interesting thing about OpenAI is, and we've never seen it with any other AI technology, we have board members from almost every organization in Europe coming to us at Microsoft, and I'm sure Cognizant have a very similar experience. Any consultancy or technology organization would probably have a similar experience, that board members from across Europe are coming because they want to learn. They see it in the news, they get a lot of information in the media, they don't understand the technology fully, and specifically in its application in an enterprise context. So once they have even a high-level understanding of the technology and its possibilities, they will start ideating between themselves, and they will want to see these. There will be momentum, and that momentum is critical for the success of any project. Again, from my experience and the pattern that I've seen in different organizations, those where the ideation started from the board down, were the organizations that were successful in implementing something relatively quickly, and then moving to everything that you said. So design thinking, which is part of the ideation process, but also creating a COE for OpenAI internally in the organization in order to scale. So beyond the first use case, you'd obviously want to, each business unit will come up with their own ideas, and you want to make sure that you have the ability to scale internally with the organization. Requires a bit of work, admittedly, but if everything was easy, we wouldn't be here.
I fully agree with you. Actually, one of the things I was really impressed with is when we talked upstairs and you were telling me that what you're seeing as demand is not coming from the CIO organization, it's coming from the board, and you never had as many board meetings in the past sort of few months as you've had with this. But I do hope that this is the kind of inflection point. I wrote an article in 2019, a white paper about human-machine collaboration. It was something for the Cognizant folks I did with the future of work. And back in 2019, I was running a data science function back then. Back in 2019, we were predicting that with technologies, enterprise really need to figure out what humans are good about, what they need to do, and what machines can do better. And then we need to have a symbiotic relationship with this machinery. This machinery now has accelerated into a Gen AI, and now everybody's thinking, hey, I can have $3.5 trillion worth of productivity gains How can I do that? Well, how you can do that, you need to completely refocus and transform yourself as an organization. New functions need to be created within the enterprise. How many companies have ethics board? How many companies have boards that really do nothing but understand what the data is saying, and how can you curate it in an ethical, compliant, and fair manner, as you said. So there's a lot of new functions that needs to be created. We're not there yet, but I do think as the top management beginning to appreciate the opportunity, they begin to also appreciate what they need to do to take advantage of this opportunity. And I think that's an exciting journey that we're going to be on for the next 2 years.
Great. So you will be able to ask a lot of questions still during the drinks. Yeah? So we're all here. So anybody that want to ask a last question to?
That's right.
Yeah, well,
right.
I think it's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of questions, but more from the end user business perspective, but because I see all the questions more technical IT. So the first one is, what is your expectation or required support from the end users? How can we support to also improve your accuracy in terms of content, but also communication with the end users? And second, how will you or what is your strategy to attract or involve companies/customers to support you? We are seeing now, for example, I don't know, using companies' data to detect gaps on their processes, because coming from a business perspective, I'm also more interested to see how this AI support me to detect the gaps on my process. I don't know, improvement actions behind via the AI capabilities.
I think the first question is very related to user, right? I mean, in terms of user, could you give me a bit of context of what kind of user you mean?
Find the right answer.
Right. So there's a level of training that probably is that you will cover in terms of the large language model, in terms of improving the way that the system thinks and kind of like digest the language. But there's what I was meaning also, that one part that is controllable also from your company perspective. And perhaps I think it's nice to show the slide of the 3 elements. Because, from a design perspective, when you're looking into interacting with your end users, if you imagine that you're designing a product for an end user, the traditional way of doing it, and what has been like since the 1950s, is that you observe the user, you observe the people that are going to use your product, and based on the information that you're collecting, that you're going to create your product. Since 2010, there has been also a lot of from Scandinavia, a methodology that is involving more users, so participatory design, where we are also using, involving the users in creating the product. And we have been also creating, elements for helping users to create the product with us. What is very interesting, I think, in this moment of large language models and generative AI is that they become a tool for end users to also shape the product. And it's not only for end users, right, but also for us as designers and technologists to iterate this product at scale and in a very, very quick basis. So in terms of how to involve the users, I think that there's moments in that design process that you can involve the users in a different way. What Pablo, for example, was showing of usability testing, I think that is very, very important that in the introduction of generative AI, that you still keep that aspect into account of involving them into the design process and iterating with them, not only the prompts, but also like the why and the moments that you're going to be introducing the solution of generative AI. And then there's the second question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think there was mention about accuracy. We always have to compare to what we have today, right? So if I compare a search platform as an example, based on LLM to a search platform that based on keyword search, if I take low level of relevancy and improve it, I might not be 100% accurate, but I'm going to be better than what I have today. So my approach to this would be maybe less deterministic and more in the area of, can we make what we have today better? So if what we have today is nothing, then obviously anything is better. But if what we have today is measurable in terms of levels of accuracy and we can do better with LLM, then it's great. In terms of user testing, so in some consumer applications, accuracy is actually quite important, right? But again, it's not a deterministic binary, so it's either the very right thing or not. Give you an example. We're working with the luxury brands, fashion retailer, fashion retailer of luxury brands, I should say. So what they did is they used the power of the LLM to understand language, to understand semantics, in order to create like a fashion assistant. So it's a few-step process that they created, actually really clever. No advice from Microsoft. They just used the tool themselves, but created a multi-process approach. Basically, understanding the human language and fetching the right products as a recommendation, instead of your traditional recommendation engine, which are based on statistics, they're using the LLM to fetch the right products, which is a recommendation to a user, given what they say. I have this type of suit. What would be what would be the right choose from your product catalog, not just any product catalog, right? So not from whatever the model knows, from the product catalog of the company. Now, you can imagine with that kind of application, huge danger to the brand, especially if it's a luxury brand, right? So what they're doing is exactly what you said. So they're involving, let's say, once they feel comfortable with the platform after a lot of testing internally, they're involving, I think, 1,000 VIP users, real customers. And they say, look, we have a platform. We would really love your feedback. And they probably gave them a feedback tool as well. I'm not sure of that detail, but that's how they're doing it. And once they're confident with what those users come up with, they're very happy to take the hit on the brand with 1,000 users. But the value that they're getting from those users is amazing, right? You could use the same approach for internal users. No problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just not going to sort of elaborate more because I think you said it perfectly. But I think of users are different kinds of users. We are talking about one category of users. When I was in Copenhagen yesterday, I was working with one of the folks that showed up, one of our clients, manufacture motors for boats. They manufacture large motors, more small motors. The problem is they don't necessarily also are responsible for the post-sales maintenance of those. And oftentimes also some assembly of these motors take place outside of the factory. So you can imagine they have all of these motors out there all over the world, and you're trying to maintain those motors. And some of these motors have been altered. Because, when it came to that particular assembly bit, they did not have that part, but it's still working fine. Now you're trying to maintain that. So you imagine yourself as an end user, as a mechanic. You're trying to clean the darn engine, and your digital print or whatever the factory sent you is not the same. So for me, because there's so many examples of generative AI, if you're able to actually curate all of those kind of post-sales engines, you're able to create a library. And then for that particular mechanic who's an end user, they can quickly say, this engine has been altered like this. And therefore, for me to start the cleaning, I cannot do it this way, I can do it that way. So for me, there's going to be a ton of these type of use cases where our end users are not our classic sort of hollowed out middle management, as you called it, Gregory, is going to be somebody who needs to be able to have a synthesis of a number of sources so they can take action with the highest level of quality. And I think that's going to be the really exciting part. Obviously, how do you curate that? How do you curate that insight? How do you have the experience? How do you make sure that you're learning? Because it's not a one shot. Just because a mechanic was able to clean that engine, there's going to be a new model. There's going to be another way of altering the design for the assembly. So how do you keep this as a kind of a virtual cycle in an enterprise that is part of your core business, that you make these things, you put them out there, you take the learnings into the next design, and the next user group who's going to take it 2 years from now is still going to be able to perform the same level at the highest level of quality. This is just we're just beginning to scratch the surface. So I think it's just going to be, very exciting for all of us going through this journey.
Now I want to be rude, but thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to us. I think we all want to invite you to the drink. I think for me, some conclusions is about there is a lot in the art of the possible. There is a lot of possible nowadays. And the biggest challenge is that the art of the impossible can maybe become possible tomorrow. And I think that's the journey where I think together with our technology partners, together with you, we absolutely can co-create. And the last comment, which I think is a personal point of view on generative AI, asking the question, the way of how we will ask the question will become extremely important. So I'm already trying for 25 years to ask the right question to my lady, and I'm always getting it wrong. So I need to get it right, because otherwise I think I will go busted in the use of generative AI. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions, we are open here to discuss and talk. And thank you, and have a good way home.